Alright guys, welcome to RC Mojo. This week we're going to be doing a little work on the Hercules Hobbies Reefer. We're going to be fitting the LEDs. Now I haven't got the electronics running yet, so we won't be able to completely finish the install, but we can get the LEDs installed and run the wiring up to the toolbox. And that will probably be plenty for the one video. We'll tackle the rear bumper lights first. It's attached with 4 self-tappers, so they need to come out. And to get to the light buckets, the covers need to be removed too, with their 3 little screws each. There's not too many different screw types, and as we only recently finished building it, we can drop all the screws in a pot so we don't lose any. So here we are then, one set of light buckets that conveniently fit 5mm LEDs, not a mix of 3s and 5s like a lot of kits. Now we could just start installing things and wiring it up, but there's a couple of little things we can do to get a better final result. First is the light bleed. If I pop an LED on the tester, which is available for a couple of quid from China by the way, it's a bit naff but it works. We can see quite a bit of light finds its way out of the bottom of the LED. That will make the neighbouring light show a slight glow when it's dark, so we'll need to paint them to block out the light. The second thing to think about is the orientation of them. Each LED has an anode and a cathode. The anode is the longer leg and connects to the positive side of the supply. The shorter leg is the cathode and connects to the negative side. The RC Mojo light controllers run a common positive, so to save some wiring we can connect all the anodes together and run only the one wire to the controller. So when we position them we want the long legs to all be on the same side. For this install, having them pointing towards the bottom will make them easy to connect together and leave plenty of space at the top for some resistors. A little bit of glue to help keep them in place isn't a bad idea too. Polycement works a treat as it won't fog up the plastic like cyanoacrylate, and if you really need to remove the LED, it's not too difficult to crack the joint. When the glue's nice and dry, we can go over the back of the LEDs with some white paint, just so we can try and reflect some of that light forwards again. Let it completely dry and go over the buckets and LEDs with some black paint to block out anything left over. You do have to watch out for the bits where the lens clip in though. The paint will almost certainly wick down and make a mess of the lens if you go overboard. So we only have one set of wires coming away from the bumper. We'll need to get some wires from one side to the other. Now we might just be able to get them across the middle without getting caught up in the mounting holes, but much safer would be to loop around the bottom. We just need to open up a couple of slots for the wires to sit in. A couple of bites of the Dremel and it's ready to start the fun bit, the soldering. First job, we need to connect all the anodes together. We could use some wire, but since the legs are more than long enough, we can carefully bend them flat. It's best not to bend them right at the LED, as there's a good chance you'll crack the LED, causing damage. Lightly gripping the LED with some pliers to use as a spacer works a treat. You can bend the outer two so they sit flat. Solder them together and to the inner LED and clip off their legs. And now we have what's more or less a bus bar running along the anodes of the LEDs. Repeat on the other side and we can move on to the resistors. First we need to tin the cathode legs near the LED. Now it's best to do this before clipping the legs where possible. The legs act as a heatsink, taking some of the heat away from the diode. We'll be running these on a 6V supply, so 220 ohm resistors will do the trick. They're a little bit of a compromise to cover the different forward voltages of the LEDs, but they're going to produce plenty of light. We can cut one of the legs down so there's 3mm left by the resistor. Tin it with some fresh solder and solder it to one of the cathodes at a bit of an angle so we get plenty of clearance when the cover goes back on. Rinse and repeat for the other 5. Clip off the LED legs and trim the resistor legs for attaching the wires. As a double check, it might be a good idea to make sure the cover still fits nicely. There's no reason why it shouldn't, there's loads of space there. Now, before we start wiring things up, we need to decide where the wires are going to leave the bumper. It's a bit tricky to get a good feel for it on the chassis, so it's going to be easiest to remove the bulkhead and use it for reference. It's only held on with 4 screws, and since the chassis is being nicely clamped together with lots of other fixings, we don't need to worry about it warping. We can pop the bulkhead into the bumper now and offer up one of the covers. There's not too much space, but there is a nice little gap between the bulkhead and the cover. If we can get it to come up between those 2 little nubs, it should work a treat. Okay, to connect the resistors we will use some fairly small gauge black wire. It will be more than up to the job. For the anodes we've got some chunkier wire, also black, which is a little naughty. It should really be a different colour, but its size should be a good enough indication it's not the same as all the rest. To make life really easy and speed things up, some cutters with a built-in wire stripper really are a must-have. The ends of the resistors need tinning with fresh solder, as do the stripped ends of the wire. Most of the LEDs will get their own wire that goes up to the toolbox, but the inner two, the reversing lights, are going to be connected in parallel, so there's a little bit extra to do. So this wire solders up to one of the reversing LED resistors, runs around the bottom through the slots we made, and solders up to the resistor of the other reversing LED. Next we've got the tail lights and indicators. These need the wires to be long enough to go round the bottom and continue off to the toolbox. To keep them in place as we go, a little bit of blue tack helps a lot. The last bit for this side is the bigger wire for the anodes. It just solders to one end of the bus bar. It will need a little bit of bending to shape to fit neatly, so we'll grab it with some pliers so we don't stress the LED leg. It will run around the bottom and this time solder up to the anodes of the other side, giving us a common connection to all the anodes. And again, the wire needs a little bit of a bend, so grab it with some pliers and push the wire down out of the way. All that's left now is to solder some long lengths of thin wire to the reverse LED's resistor, where we soldered the length from the other side, and wire to the last two LED resistors. And we're going to need a length of thick wire for the anode supply. It needs to get soldered to the anode bar. Doesn't really matter where, as long as you get a good joint. That's all the soldering done on the bumper. Next we're going to use a bit of hot glue just to keep the wires in place. It's fairly important. If you don't, there's a good chance the joints might get pulled, or vibration will cause things to wag about and break. It doesn't take much, just pop a blob in a corner and press the wires in. A couple of blobs around the bottom might be a good idea too, just to make sure the wires don't fall out. To keep all the wires together, we're going to use some heat shrink. It's tempting to sleeve the whole length, but heat shrink goes very stiff when it's shrunk, and really struggles to get round corners. It'll work just fine if we use 5 or 6 mm lengths every so often. 6 bits should do the job for this install. The covers can go back on too. They should fit nicely, we just need to be careful we don't pinch any of the wires. The bulkhead should fit too, with the wires coming up through the gap. So the heat shrink doesn't fall about, it's going to need shrinking with a heat gun. It's regular heat shrink without adhesive, so after it's cooled we can push it along the wires into position. We might as well loosely fit the bulkhead to the bumper too. There's a fair chance we'll be able to fit it directly to the chassis with it in place. But first, I think we should test all the LEDs to make sure they actually work. For power, we've got a little bench supply that lets us limit the current. So just in case there's a short, it's not going to damage anything. We're going to need to set the voltage. 5 will do, but we're going to be running on 6, so we might as well set it up. For the current, we turn the knob all the way down, so the current limit is essentially 0 milliamps. Now we can short the output and carefully turn the current knob until we get around 20 milliamps, which should be plenty. So we can connect the crock clips to the wires, we can quickly strip a bit off all the ends. We only need a couple of millimeters. Okay, the positive crock clip gets connected to the thick wire that goes to all the anodes, and we can pop it out of the way. When we touch the negative clip to the thin wires, we should get each LED on its own, and of course the two reverse lights together. Here we go then. There's the left indicator, the left tail light, right indicator, right tail light, and the reversing light pair. You can see the voltage drops a bit for the reversing lights. That's because together they're drawing a bit more current than we set the power supply for. If we turn up the current just a touch, the voltage will go back to 6 volts, so it's all good. So that's all working as it should, so we can go and fit it to the chassis. The bumper and bulkhead slot back into the chassis, and the 4 screws get refitted, and the 4 screws on the end get tightened up too. The Tamiya lights have a cable that runs inside the box between the plastic floor and the base, but I want to run the cable along the chassis. For access, we're going to need to remove the toolbox. The base comes off first, then the box comes away from the chassis after removing its 4 screws. To get to the chassis along the side, we're going to need to remove the wheels. It's typical stuff, just watch out for the pins that run through the axles. They're all too easy to lose. To keep the wires in place, we'll use some small cable clips, available on eBay from various places and not surprisingly available in many hundreds from China. All we do is stick them to the chassis, open up the clip and pop the wires in. 3 or 4 clips along the chassis will do the job and keep the wires out of all the moving parts. Wheels back on, and we've got the chassis done. The box, however, has some more lights that we need to deal with. The kit comes with decals, but before we painted the doors we cut them out to fit some LEDs. I've cut these bits from some 5mm clear acrylic sheet. They're not an ideal shape, a 45-degree angle would work better, but they'll do the job. There's a hole for a 3mm LED, which reflects off the angle and out of the amber face. Works fairly well, I think, and will take up quite a bit less space. They press into the rectangular holes in the doors with the LED legs towards the middle. They do need some glue too, which I didn't film. Well, I thought I was filming, but I wasn't. You get the idea though, we just need to run a little bit of poly cement around the edges. Let it thoroughly dry and we can start wiring them up. This time we're going to use 1K resistors, or 1000 ohms, rather than the 220 ohms we used at the back. This reduces the current the LEDs have available and makes them run a little bit dimmer. They're running lights, so we don't need them to be super bright. I'm afraid I'm going to have to breeze through this bit a bit. I'm running behind on the editing this week. When we connect the power, they all light up there, and I think they look pretty good. They could perhaps be a bit more even, but they're going to do the job nicely. The wiring looks a little bit messy at the moment, so I think I'm going to have to sleeve them, but functionally it's doing its job. We just need to reattach the toolbox to the chassis, this time with the wires from the tail lights fed through one of the holes in the box. When we position everything, we need to be extra sure none of the wires are getting pinched before we tighten up any screws. The base of the box goes on too, again being careful not to pinch anything. And that's about it. With the doors closed, there's nothing to give away our 2 hours of effort except for the orange lights. But that's not a bad thing, it means the install is nice and tidy. When I've got the electronics ready, we can open up the box again and install it, along with a 2S LiPo or similar for power. There's the Tamiya electric legs kit to put together too, so there's plenty of build left. Well, sorry for the hurried second act of the video, I hope it wasn't too jarring, but as always, do hit the like button if you like the video, comment if you got something to say, subscribe if you haven't already, and of course, thanks for watching, have a cookie, or if you have one, a custard cream, because they're better. Bye guys!